Welcome to the first podcast of 2019.
I was wondering if you're going to get the date right.
Yeah, no, I did get it right.
I have got it wrong while I've been writing it at least half a dozen times in the last
It's
week.
quite easy to fix, fairly easy to fix an 8 into a 9, relatively easy.
We've got an interesting show for you today because we have the second part of our visit from Tyler and his girlfriend Kadie, who also is the design brain behind Modern Huntsman. So this show is entirely a chat with her about what it's been like re-envisaging what a hunting publication is, because that is what the first volume of Modern Huntsman was, and volume 2 carried that on, and a lot of that has come from her brain. So we delve deep into it and find out how she got there.
And we go quite a bit into not just that, design work as well, just in general, and kind of going self-employed, talking about those things, and finding out a bit more about how it works out in the United States. I might add that she was pretty ill when we recorded this podcast.
She was. Poor.
Yeah.
Poor lady.
Yeah, very poor.
But she grafted through.
She did. She
got
more
more than an hour.
Yeah, and they then went to the rugby the following day, which we do talk about on the podcast. Probably not the most exciting game of rugby, unfortunately.
It really wasn't.
They went to.
Unfortunately,
it wasn't, but they still got to experience a bit of atmosphere and Murrayfield and
yeah, we had a good day out.
It's a good day out in Edinburgh.
I hope everybody has had some time off between Christmas and New Year. We did.
Yes,
which was great. In fact, we didn't come into the office at all. A full 2-week break. I kind of went dark in terms of using the internet as well. I barely touched social media, and I didn't really post anything either. It was bliss. It was nice to sort of reset my system in that way. Sort of jaded after a whole year of going non-stop, eyeballs glued to social media and emails and video, because that's what we do, and pictures.
Yeah, it is. I stayed up to date on kind of Instagram a bit, but apart from that, that was as much as I did really.
But I did manage to do a lot of hunting, which was always the intention with the time off. We went up to our small syndicate shoot a few times. I shot on the foreshore quite a number of times with my friend Eden, and got out for a couple of stalks as well. So it was good.
And I did a massive spring clean at my house, which I think probably a lot of people listening probably end up doing.
It's a good thing to do after Christmas.
Like 4 days. I was knackered. I did 4 days solid work. Like loft was redone, cupboard was redone. All those little odd jobs like door handles and stuff in the garage and just tidying. And it was 4 days of solid work. But from first in the morning until like 9 at night kind of stuff.
I cut a lot of wood as well for my house to keep me warm, so I don't freeze. We've got another competition for you. This week we have the chance for you to win. I'm being distracted by my dog who's grumping. Life is so hard being a puppy.
It is. You know what? I mean, because I edit the shows, this dog disturbs more podcasts than anything else.
He's sleeping now. Anyway, we're giving you the chance to win a Hornady reloading manual. It is the very latest edition. It is the edition that I use. Actually, that's something else I was doing.
Reloading.
I reloaded a lot more ammo in this last 2-week period than I'd probably done in the previous 12 months, just because I had a bit of time on my hands. And I also went and worked up some loads for some rifles that I hadn't managed to hand load for. So that was awesome. And I was using this reloading manual that we're going to give you the chance to win, which is latest edition of Hornady. It has all the latest powders for the relevant cartridges, and of course all the latest up-to-date cartridges, up until the ones that are being released now at all the American shows, because I know that Hornady have just announced as of like 2 days ago a 300 PRC, and that won't be in the book because it's only just been announced. But I actually write about it in next month's Sporting Rifle, so you'll be able to read that if you read Sporting Rifle and check out the specs of what their 308 based cartridge is going to be. It's a
They haven't.
Magnum cartridge. So it's like a 300 Win Mag.
Was Santa good to you?
Oh, hang on, we haven't told people how they can
Oh,
win.
sorry. I thought you had.
Santa was good to me. We're going to make this a Facebook one. So if you use Instagram, we will mention it on there, but you'll have to enter it over on Facebook. We'll stick up a post today or tomorrow and just follow the instructions.
And don't worry if you are a new listener, we don't just have all of our competitions on Facebook. We generally actually only have them on Instagram and through email. It's just that this one first
Just for a change.
Just for a change, it's just going to be on Facebook only.
So head over to Podcast Into the Wilderness on Facebook and you'll be able to enter there.
There you go. And will it just be a picture?
I'll put up a picture of the reloading manual.
I think all you need to do is comment below.
Yeah.
That will be so simple.
Read the instructions, but yeah, that's probably.
So, back to Santa.
Santa was good to me. The problem when you say that is you put me on the spot and I'm racking my brains because I know all the things that I gave out. Beth's giving me a funny look now. I got some new CrossFit shoes.
Yeah.
In fact, they've only just arrived today. I tried them on in the car awkwardly. I need to go and put them on properly, but they feel like they fit.
Oh,
They're super light.
What else did you get?
Quite a lot of other CrossFit gear.
You didn't just get CrossFit.
No, I didn't.
stuff.
No, I'm going through the list. You got me it's probably the thing I've used the most of everything I got given at Christmas, which is a new seat for the foreshore. Well, that was what it was intended for, but you could use it for anything, and it auto-inflates,
just an
and you can blow it up. And my buddy Eden has been very jealous in the outings that we've had because his arse has been cold and mine's been like sitting on a cloud.
Yeah. Well, I got a new jacket. Did I get 2 new jackets or just 1 new jacket? But like a puffer. We use them all the time. We had a Browning one, which I think must be at least 6 years old.
We normally have one in the office, but
and I've just got a brand new Rab one, which has been keeping me warm. And then I got some new trainers. They're kind of, I think I talked about them before in the product podcast. But I've had them for about 3 years, and the heels are going. There's almost no tread on them, and they're called base camp shoes. They're kind of a hybrid between a walking shoe and not quite a trainer. And yeah, I really like them.
I got a bunch of tools as well. Mum and Dad bought me some
tools.
Cool tools.
Tools are good. And over the Christmas period, I've been shooting a few times, but mainly actually just working the dog. I haven't shot a single thing. But my dog has been borrowed by everyone.
I used your dog one day when you were busy, and he was great.
Yeah, no, he's coming on really, really nicely. I actually put up a post last night asking people about advice on how to put weight back on the dog.
You've had loads of responses to that.
Well, I mean, the problem is he sheds, like, you cannot feed him. I can't feed him enough, and I have been giving him liver, and yet he still looks really skinny and like skinny on the uncomfortable skinny side. And I need to bulk them up, and I had a huge amount of responses, so maybe I need to go through them, because there was actually a few people that also messaged saying, when you get the responses, can you put the responses up so we can see what the answers is. So, I mean, if you do have this problem with your dog of not being able to put weight on it, then give us an email and let us know how you solve the problem, because there's other people that would like to know it as well.
Well, we can stick it up on social, but we should probably mention it at the start of next podcast as well. We can run through them.
Yeah, podcast@paceproductionsuk.com. And we'll get some of those responses out, and I will go and try some of them out.
We would very much appreciate if all of you kind listeners would go and leave us a review on however you listen to this podcast. Apart from Spotify, there should be a way to leave a review. It really helps us, hopefully 5 stars, but if you've got any criticisms, let us know. We'll always try and make it better.
Yep. We've got a few things coming up in the year. We are going to, like we said back in last year, there is improvements happening to the show. There's improvements happening in the office. We're really just kind of sorting out the office this year, that we're sitting right in front of a computer that is being...
It's got its guts on the table.
It's guts everywhere, which I've just rebuilt, and, that's the way to be used. And we've got a few other bits and bobs that we need to go and repair and sell, and I've just got a brand new drone that's sitting across there. That's how busy we've been. There's computer bits everywhere. There's a brand new drone sitting there. There's a new Steadicam thing sitting there. The start of the year is always a bit crazy. So I'm hoping, really hoping, by the end of February, maybe, that we'll be in a position to ramp the podcast up a bit more. And
hopefully. We've got a room behind where we're sitting now, which is about to be gutted and turned into a permanent podcast studio.
Yeah, so that's kind of what we're waiting on, is making a studio. So and it will make a big difference because then we can set up cameras and then we can bring guests into a nicer situation, nice environment. So yeah, that's the plan.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
It's been on the cards for the last 12 months, but it is actually happening now.
Yeah, it is.
We are moving forward, and there is progress.
Yeah, so all those people that you will not believe the amount of people that ask us. The biggest criticism is the podcast don't come out enough, and our aim is to rectify that. So, and also, like we said, bring some video content, because right now we upload it to YouTube, and it's just the audio track. So hopefully we can put a video track on Facebook and YouTube, so that when we do have cool guests on, you get to see them chatting with us.
Interacting, drinking coffee and that kind of
thing. Or whiskey late at night.
We will be having some new podcast stickers made that can go on the outside. So currently we have car stickers, which you have to put inside your windscreen or wherever you put them on your window.
Which we realised after we did it are completely useless for everyone here.
Yeah,
in
this office, because we've all got
tinted windows, so you can't see them.
But most people seem to manage to use them fine. Yeah. But it also means that you can't stick it on like a case. Like a
Pelly case or whatever.
So we're going to have new ones made up in the next couple of weeks, so keep an eye on the shop. We still have Volume 2s of Modern Huntsman, which you're going to hear all about in this podcast, in the office as well.
Volume 1 is completely sold out. We told you before Christmas, if you didn't get in there fast, you were not going to get one. And now, unfortunately, you will have to wait.
I'm not quite sure.
We don't even have a time frame, because I know the guys in the States, they've got limited numbers as well. So basically we're looking at maybe getting some done over here, but that's kind of further down the line. So you'll need to just wait.
But you can check all that stuff out over on the shop on thepacebrothers.com.
We also have prints, which we mentioned before, and they're limited number prints. We're going to bring out new prints every few months of just a selection from our library, and some of them have been selling phenomenally well, but we limit them, so there'll be the maximum of 40 prints, and then that will be it, period. So you need to get them in quickly. If you've got one that you particularly like, then you need to go, because we had 2 pictures I knew they would do pretty well, and we had the first batch of the limited number came in the office, and they were sold within the hour of them going on the store. So that shows you how quickly they are actually going, the popular ones.
I had something very exciting just before Christmas, which was that my tar skin and skull and the chamois and the fallow antlers from my hunting in New Zealand last June arrived via FedEx, and it's awesome. It's so nice to see it again, and I now have the skin in my house, and the skulls. Well, Beth's been positioning them around the house so that they look nice and fit in with the themes.
That is good. Well, your stuff arrived safely. Touch wood. None of the deliveries over Christmas so far, we have not had a single email to say.
We sent a lot of stuff.
I think over 300, 400 packages. That's individual, that's not items. That's just some people have a lot more. Went in the first week. The post office, only the local post office, they were horrified.
Literally, it would take them an entire day to process all the.
Our postage bill was almost $2,000.
It's ridiculous. And we actually have for any listeners who have ordered stuff right up to right before Christmas or between Christmas and New Year and now, none of that has been sent yet, because we only got back into the office on Monday, as per the message which was on the website. But everything, as I can see, is all Beth has packaged up, everything ready to go.
It's quite a big bundle there, actually.
Yeah, when we leave the office today, that will be going to the post office.
Yes, so do not fear, your package is on its way. But we've had it was very touch and go with the Modern Huntsman that arrived, because our customs in the UK had, these are hundreds of copies, thousands of pounds worth in value, and the customs in the UK had decided that they would take the cellophane wrap off, which we had picture evidence of that was on in America, went on a ship, arrived in the UK, they took the wrap off, and you know what they did?
Left it in the rain.
Left it in the rain. That's exactly what they do every single time. Books.
So we actually had a couple of damaged copies.
Yeah, books in the rain. And yes, and then we got a package yesterday, which was our brand new drone and a piece of equipment for our Steadicam, and the box looked like it had been trampled on. So once again, the delivery driver's doing outstanding jobs.
It's probably not the delivery driver's fault. I think it's more the place that sorts it. But it can't be as bad. Was it you, Daryl, that showed me the video of China? A video yesterday of a Chinese sorting factory for parcels. And literally there were mountains of parcels, and people were walking up over the parcels to go and get stuff and throw it down onto the conveyor belts.
I think there's equal blame everywhere. I think on the whole, probably delivery drivers do a pretty good job. But there is some crap ones, and I'm talking about everyone, because even my postman, who unfortunately I had a postwoman for about 3 years, and she was absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. I never missed a parcel. She was very sensible about what items she left. Then now we have this other dude who sometimes just can't be arsed leaving them. Or he does the outstanding thing of leaving packages in my dirty-ass barbecue. And it is so filled with grease. I've never said to him once, ever, oh, it's cool, you can leave it in the barbecue, but you can't leave it in the big-ass outhouse that's open right next to it. I've never said that you could do that. And over Christmas, I had about 3 or 4 packages that the outside were just completely covered in grease. It's not even waterproof. So,
do you know, we had the same thing. And I moved my barbecue.
I had to move my barbecue. So I've got to move things because of people's stupidity in my own garden.
Oh, dearie me. There is a lot that's been happening in the last 3 or 4 weeks in the world of hunting and fishing, from fish farms to literally today. There's some news out from the Scottish government to do with fox hunting and the number of hounds that they want to reduce packs to for hunting, which I'm not going to talk about in this intro, but we are going to gather all of this because we probably have about 6 or 7 weeks of news items to catch everyone up on, and I think we'll probably try and put out a news piece as a separate podcast fairly soon. And
that's the intentions going ahead, is we're going to be a lot more up to date with these things when we have the studio up and running.
Yep.
So you'll be up to date when it happens
all the time.
Yeah.
And I think we've held you up enough.
Well, I was going to say something else. I was going to say
you're going to hold them up.
I can hold people up. It's fine. People have gone back to work. We know all these people that we can see the stats. And over Christmas and New Year, well, what's amazing is actually the amount of people that do download and listen during Christmas.
We even had Christmas Day.
Christmas Day. We even had orders on Christmas Day, and Monday this week, most people went back to work, and we saw a decline in listeners on Monday, and then the following day, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the graph just spikes completely up. So everyone's gone back to work. They've had a busy Monday, and now they hate their lives again, and they're like, "What am I doing back at work?"
Let's listen to a podcast.
And let's listen to a podcast,
which we're fine with.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, did you see any good movies or TV series over the Christmas period?
Good movies, best. Oh yeah, we saw Aquaman. Yeah, I liked it.
Worth a watch.
Definitely worth.
Do you have to be a superhero fan?
No, you definitely don't. Because I'm not up to the speed with like all the Marvels and all of the superhero stuff. Yeah. I'm probably a few behind, and it completely stands alone. And it's a great film. I mean, the main actor, whose name escapes me at the moment, he's a very cool guy.
What's his name? Jason. He's a freaking huge guy.
He's in Game of Thrones. People know
Momoa.
Yeah, Momoa. That's
what it is. He's huge.
He's very good in it.
Yeah.
And so is Amber Heard. Amber Heard's in it as well. Okay. And William Dafoe. So, I mean, what a lineup.
Yeah, that's quite
I think that's the only cinema journey we did over the...
Any TV series?
I mean, I'm up to date with Vikings.
I'm not.
I know, so I'm not going to give any spoilers, but there's a new Vikings out tonight, being Thursday, and this latest season is, on par or better than anything that's been. So
oh well, that'll be cool.
Good.
I watched Bird Box, and it's quite.
That's a big Netflix film. Isn't
it is. It's all over Netflix right now. I watched that last week. It's very suspenseful. It's good. It's probably one of the best thrillers.
Is it a horror?
The problem nowadays is that the classification for horror, I think, is quite skewed, because what I used to regard, I don't know, it's like a horror thriller, because now, like the movie Saw and Hostel.
That's like
all
horror.
they all come under like horror, but
That's extreme horror.
But I think they're shit.
You don't like them?
No, they're terrible
Saw
films.
was good.
The first Saw
was awesome.
Saw was fine, and then now you're on like Saw 28 or something.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
And for me, horror films and thriller films have gone the way of, instead of trying to be clever and suspenseful with music and cinematic effect, it's gore. And for me, that's not a good film. It doesn't have to be gory to be good. That's not the definition of a good horror film. But Bird Box, I think, has all of the kind of correct elements of, it's a psychological thriller because you're always thinking what's happening, what's going to happen.
Oh, well, maybe we'll have to watch
with the
that.
music and everything. So it's worth a watch in terms of, just the way they've put it together. I mean, it's never going to be everyone's cup of tea. It won't be. But I thought it was a decent production.
Oh,
and
so I'll stick it on the list.
What's her name?
Sandra Bullock.
Sandra Bullock. She was very good in it.
I've not seen her in a movie in years.
And me neither, but she was good in that. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So that's
movie recommendations. Let us know.
I watched First Man as well.
Oh, I've not seen that.
One
About
with
First Man on the Moon.
First Man on the Moon. Yeah, it was okay. I mean, I wouldn't rush out to go and see it, but if it happened to be on Netflix or another platform at some point, then it's worth a watch. But I wouldn't necessarily go and buy it on DVD or something to go and see it. But it's worth a quick watch.
There was one other film that we watched. It was just before Christmas, and that was the Robert the Bruce one. I'm trying to think what it's called now. First.
I know what you're talking about.
Outlaw King.
Outlaw King. That's it.
It was advertised everywhere at that rugby game.
Well, I think they had a deal with Scottish
rugby team. Yeah.
It wasn't a bad.
It wasn't a
bad film.
I think in a way the good thing, but also the problem with it was it was quite historically accurate, which meant that there was a limit to how much you could over dramatize it because they were kind of sticking to the timeline.
Never go full Braveheart.
Well, this is the thing. I think I was kind of expecting Braveheart again. Yeah,
it's always a tricky one because if you do Hollywood it too much, then it's not a historical film anymore. Is it?
It's not. But I mean, it was very, very well shot. It was a good film. It's worth a watch for sure.
It does make me laugh though because they always get actors that aren't from Scotland to play main characters.
Yeah, I don't understand
and I refuse to believe there isn't an actor from Scotland that could play the role.
It has to be.
I mean, he wasn't that bad at it, but it makes me laugh because that always ends up happening. And apparently, a Scottish accent is quite hard to do. I wouldn't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe a fake one. But now we have taken enough time.
Now we have. So now we're gonna jump into the podcast with Kadie Smith.
Enjoy.
Kadie, welcome to the Into the Wilderness podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. You were sat in the room earlier today when we recorded Tyler's podcast, which I think is going to come out before we release this podcast to the world. And he was dropping quite a lot of little hints to this podcast that we're going to record now, which is going to start by focusing on your role within Modern Huntsman as a designer.
It's a good place to start.
It is a great place to start. Obviously, we've got Volume 2 on the table here, but let's look back to pre-Volume 1, Kickstarter time, and at some point somebody must have had a conversation with you to say, this is what we need to do. Can you please help dream up a vision for how it's going to look and feel?
Right. Well, according to Brad, which the details are a little fuzzy for me, but he actually reached out to me before Modern Huntsman was much of anything but an idea. And at the time I had just kind of started freelancing and nothing really came of it. Then Tyler and I met, started dating. So this is kind of like pre-Tyler and I.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
fate.
Yes. And then he came across Tyler and they connected. And then we kind of realized that we had a previous conversation, but it was still just such a new idea that nothing had really happened. And that was about the time I started designing for a magazine in Los Angeles. It was a women's magazine, so completely different demographic. but I just enjoyed it so much, and we started talking about what it might look like for me to work on Tyler and I had always wanted to work on a book together, and I just finished his branding, and it was very much in line with what Modern Huntsman wanted to do design-wise, and Brad and I have a very similar design aesthetic. So it just kind of became a natural progression. Brad did not want to do the design for the book. He's a phenomenal designer, but it's just not something
I didn't realize that was his thing as well.
So he's also a designer and very, very talented, but has never really wanted to do layout design. Layout design is probably my favorite form of design, so it kind of came together nicely.
You're the perfect person for it.
Yeah, so it worked really well.
And what, I mean, Modern Huntsman looks so different to any other hunting publication I've ever seen. You know, Volume 1 looked different. Volume 2 even has a little bit of a different feel, but you can see the connection between 1 and 2. What was your thought process as you were trying to work out, how do I need to lay this out so that the design carries with the message and the ethos of the content? Because it very much does, I feel.
It's interesting. I think a huge reason why it looks so different from anything in the industry is that I've never actually read any other hunting magazines.
So you've never looked at any of them, which does help, because if you don't... Even without thinking about it, if you've read hundreds of publications, you're obviously going to think there's something there that I like, I'm going to take that.
Right. You kind of naturally mimic what you enjoy.
Yeah.
And I enjoy architecture and interior design magazines, and I grew up on National Geographic and Outsider magazine.
National Geographic, I mean, we still get it today, yeah.
I mean, it's a classic.
Yeah.
Everyone knows about it. And so my background and what I preferred for an outdoors magazine was a bit more photojournalistic, a little bit more of a documentary eye. And then my very, very brief experience in the hunting industry was just a little bit away from that. And when my involvement in Modern Huntsman, I wanted to kind of bring things back to that documentary style where it felt like just the facts and a story told really purely. And then also bring in my design preference with architecture, which is very clean lines, minimal ornamentation, and really let the content speak for itself.
So no clutter.
No clutter.
So before you met Tyler, before you were involved in Modern Huntsman, you had no hunting background whatsoever. Or did you?
Maybe. I have never been on a hunt other than sitting in a field with my dad growing up. But I have 3 brothers, and my dad and my brothers always did the hunting, and then my mom and I would just cook what they brought home. And so I've grown up comfortable but never participating. So very, very limited experience.
But that's going to change.
Yeah.
Isn't it? I don't think you're going to have much choice.
I really don't think at this point I have much choice. Yeah.
You're pretty deep into it now.
I am. And I have a newfound appreciation. At the time, it just seemed like something they enjoyed doing that we benefited from, because we had a freezer with meat most of the year, and my mom didn't have to spend as much money on groceries with 4 children. Now, seeing it through my experience with Modern Huntsman, being on the inside, so to speak, a bit more, I've really had a newfound appreciation for the tradition, and also just how it affects the entire world.
What was the feedback like for you as the brains behind the designing of Volume 1 once it was in people's hands and you started to hear the feedback?
It was a little overwhelming. I don't think I realized it was going to be so well received. I'm just so apart from that industry, and in the design world, I thought, I think the content's really good and this is going to be well received among my design peers, but in my head, I just never really thought, how is this going to be received by the actual hunting community until it was, and I realized how much this was needed and how much maybe a new set of eyes was needed in the industry.
Particularly a set of eyes that hadn't been exposed, or I guess had a bias towards it.
I had no personal bias at all, except for that I thought the photography was beautiful, the stories were really moving, and there was an opportunity to tell them in a way that maybe was a little bit better received. And honestly, I think one of the most interesting parts of Volume 1 was how it was received in the design community and among friends who had no association or a negative association with the hunting community, because my community's kind of split a bit more. And so, in fact, at the time, my roommate was a vegan, a very...
When you were doing volume 1?
While I was doing volume 1. She is a very devout vegan, and we would have some great conversations about it. And that, I think, was probably the most meaningful experience, is giving her volume 1 and her eyes opening and saying, we might not still agree on everything, but this is very palatable to me, and I understand it in a way that I didn't before, and I can appreciate what you're doing. And I might still not eat meat, but it really doesn't bother me the way I thought it would. And I thought, okay, awesome. This is great.
So you're doing something right.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not to get every single person in your camp, but to maybe just have a better understanding of where everyone stands on both sides, and maybe form a bit of a bridge.
So to give people a bit of a background on your designing, how did that begin? How long have you been doing it, and what path have you taken to do your design work?
Right. So I went to school for design at Auburn University, and
so this is after high school.
This is after high school.
Yeah.
And wanted to go into graphic design because it was the only form of art and illustration where I feel like I could make money. And so that kind of started me down the path. I wanted to go into publication always. Originally, I wanted to write and design books, and then if that didn't work out, do magazines. Of course, this was kind of at a time when everyone thought print was dying. So no one was giving new jobs to very inexperienced junior designers when the whole industry was at risk. So instead, I actually got a very exciting job as a layout designer for an agency that made training manuals.
Sounds riveting.
You know, it really was. It was really the pinnacle of my career.
It was almost sincere the way you said that.
Yeah.
What kind of training?
So it was
at least an interesting topic.
No, it was not. It was training new hires for Walmart.
Okay.
So Walmart and H-E-B and some really huge companies. I did not at all believe in the business model of our clients, which was soul crushing. And then it also just, the design was
dry,
very dry, and a bit outdated.
Was a lot of stock photos of people smiling.
Stock photos, a lot of really loud neon colors trying to get you excited. And
you didn't have a lot of scope.
I did not.
Your own flair.
And I was a very, very junior designer, so I also didn't have a lot of street cred.
Your voice wasn't very loud.
Right. I was pretty much just an add-on.
You got to start somewhere, though.
Right. And so I knew pretty much immediately that I wanted to leave and started freelancing. And then actually my big break into freelancing was Fossil, the watch company, had an opening, a very, very temporary 2-month opening on their catalog team. And I thought, okay, this is a bit closer to what I wanted to do. So I just took the leap, quit my job, knew this job was only going to last 2 months, and I had 2 months to figure out how to freelance. But what I was not expecting is that the creative director at Fossil would be such an amazing mentor to me as far as my mindset before going into freelance. It was an incredible experience. He was very supportive. He helped me find so many clients when I started freelancing. The first year of freelancing was horrible. I had no idea what I was doing.
What kind of work were you picking up?
Oh, anything I could get. So I was doing advertising, social media graphics, logos, but I didn't really know how to make logos at the time. So I was just kind of trying to figure it out. So I really probably should sincerely apologize to everyone who hired me that first year because I was so new. But then again, I also charged next to nothing, so they really got quite the deal. But I started working at a coffee roaster just to kind of make some ends meet at the same time, and that's when I met most of the creative community in Dallas. That's really connected me to Brad with Modern Huntsman.
Was he in having coffees? Was he?
No, but he was part of the similar creative community.
Oh, okay.
It's where I met Tyler.
Is it a meetup thing? What is
it was just a coffee shop, but it was a coffee shop in a neighborhood that had tons of small business owners, tons of independent creatives.
So that was the place to be to meet network.
And they had no choice but to talk to me to order their coffee. So it worked out great.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And what was the jump from that to being
Here.
volume 1?
Yeah, it was quite a jump. So I met Tyler, who introduced me to a guy named Rocky, who ended up being my business coach. And he overnight changed my entire studio, my mindset, everything, to where I stopped seeing myself as a freelancer and started seeing myself as a business owner. And then I started going after work I really wanted. And the work I wanted was editorial, hands down. So my first big client was this magazine in Los Angeles. It was a women's magazine that was kind of getting started. Me and the editor really partnered together to get it off the ground, and it was very successful. And I think seeing how that went from a Kickstarter to a successful magazine, I was able to prove to Tyler and Brad that
so the model had been done
I
before.
could do this, yeah. And they knew the content, they knew the demographic, they knew exactly what they wanted Modern Huntsman to be, and I knew that if they gave me the responsibility of making the book something people would want to buy, that it could work. And I remember there was a meeting. We had so many meetings about what Modern Huntsman could be. I think both of us were thinking it probably would never happen because of all the conversations. And we were sitting in a hotel lobby, and finally we were like, okay, let's just stop dreaming for a moment and talk about what actually needs to happen now. And it was in that meeting that the entire Kickstarter campaign came together.
Right.
And I think we launched 2, maybe 3 months later. So it was a whirlwind, but we finally made some traction.
So you just had to
instead
of talking about it, just do it.
Just do it. And we'll kind of figure out how this thing will grow over time. And of course, just like anything, as it starts to gain credibility and people start to pay attention, it evolves in ways you never expected. So it was good that we just got started.
Now you're sitting in Scotland on our podcast.
Right. So really, we've reached
really
success.
made it now, eh?
Yeah.
What do you think about, you're saying that at the time when you were getting into it, the thinking was that print was dying.
Right.
It feels, and I remember that, writing for hunting magazines during that period and after, there was very much this conversation, is it all going to go digital? Will everyone be reading everything on an iPad? Things need to be more interactive, and I think that is the case, but print is still alive.
It is.
And then we're seeing things like, Modern Huntsman, okay, there's an electronic version of it, and there is stuff online that's spin off for the back of the publication, but this is a super high-level, brand new in terms of, it didn't exist before, but also new in terms of vision. And it's working. So print is not dying.
No, it's not. It's changed.
It's changed.
It's changed.
So what do you see? What has been the change?
Right. So when I first wanted to be a magazine, it was around that time, and magazines at the time were just so full of advertising. It was more of a column-based format. So smaller articles, lots of advertising. You'd have maybe 2 featured long-format articles. But it was a pretty canned format for almost every magazine. And then everything went digital, and I was involved in a few digital projects. We were even trying to turn a few of those training manuals digital. But I also worked on one digital magazine, and I think my experience, it's still alive, but I think barely. And my experience with that is subscribers didn't quite interact with the digital magazine the way that they did with print. There was less loyalty. The attention span was a lot lower. Their expectation was a lot higher for multimedia. And you just couldn't keep up with that at a similar pace, because in order to produce high-level media, you can't do that monthly. It's too hard, and it requires too much of a budget. So print started to seem more feasible again. But I think what we found, and who I will always be inspired by, is I think Ken Folk really did turn the tables as far as how we approached a printed publication, and people started really paying attention, but they had less patience for advertising. They wanted to see quality content, laid out in a very well-designed, intentional way, and they wanted something that they could hold on to and display over time. It wouldn't lose its value with the next issue. It was a collector's item. And so I think print has changed to be more of a collector's item and less
quality. It needs to be quality.
Yeah, because people don't need magazines for news. You can get that on social media. You can get that online quickly. So if we're not going to printed publications for news, then why are we going to them? And I think it's because it's to record a moment in time and have something that evolves but doesn't become a throwaway.
I mean, I guess like the National Geographic, although be it monthly, they are probably the only monthly magazine that I would have on my tabletop.
Right.
Because visually, the front cover of every National Geographic has a very nice visual to it.
They do.
And then the only other magazines that are really nice are the ones that are coming out once every 2 months, once every 3 months. The monthly or weekly ones just don't have the time. They don't have the... It's difficult. How can they get all the articles and the pictures and everything together and expect it to be a quality thing time after time? It's just not possible.
It's not possible. And I think one of the reasons National Geographic never went out of business is because their model has always been very much to document what's going on in a moment of time with a group of people, with culture, geographically, and it isn't just pressing news that is fleeting. It has a lot of depth.
The standard of their pictures have always been amongst the highest in the world of any publications. Mm-hmm. I mean, you look back even at the magazines I've got a collection from years and years. You look back and people are only actually catching up now to how they produce their pictures.
Absolutely.
When we've discussed with Tyler on previous podcasts and when we were talking about Volume 2 when we recorded earlier today, we discussed the idea that Modern Huntsman as a publication isn't just made for people who hunt, but it's made for everybody, and particularly the people who don't but can hopefully get something out of it. From the design perspective, what did you have to consider when you were putting it together so that part of the message was carried through and was, I'm trying to think of a better word than palatable for other people, right. But you know what I'm saying.
But a bit, yeah. Well, it started off with Volume 1 and we've done this with every volume, where Tyler's just let me pick whatever photos I like. So in Volume 1, it was mainly all hunting dogs, which of course wasn't going to fly. No one wanted a magazine just on dogs. Yes.
From front cover to back cover, hunting dogs.
So it was just all the dog pictures.
I know you like you. My hound has become quite fond of you.
Yeah, I always like the dogs, and it was lots of landscapes. So we did have to compromise a bit on actually showing what hunting is. But going back, I think that the best example is in college. I got really into a magazine called, now I'm going to forget it, but it was farmers, anyways, it was a farming magazine. I have no experience in agriculture or farming, but the design was beautiful, and I would buy it and keep it on my studio desk for design inspiration.
Amazing.
Well, I'm thinking in the same way, what if someone had a hunting magazine where the design was so, inspiring or well thought out that they just bought it as design inspiration and then happened to read the content. And I think in some ways that's happened a bit, where it's become more of a coffee table book, or it's designed in a way that other designers, other creatives, or other outdoor enthusiasts might enjoy it.
Yeah.
Right, because there's incredible photography, and we've kept the layout very minimal so that that photography really speaks. And we have such incredible contributors. It really it makes it easy on me. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Anytime.
Right.
Front cover of Volume 2.
Yes.
It's not even a hunting front cover.
It's not.
It doesn't have a hunting dog on it. There's not a gun. There's not even a person. Mm-hmm. That's pretty bold.
It is, and I argued for that cover.
And you won.
I won, and I like to say I was right.
It's an awesome front cover.
Thank you. Well, Chris Burkhardt is a very, very talented photographer, but I wanted something textural for this cover because, for one, we were talking about public lands, and how do you show all of the public land in one image on the cover? You really can't, because it just changes so much. And I wanted something that kind of spoke a bit to the topic, but also piqued the interest where you didn't quite know what it was. Some people even think it's an illustration and don't believe that it's a photograph, even though it is.
I've actually seen almost the same picture by a different photographer before, so I know.
Really? Okay, so you knew where it was.
So I knew straight away it was Iceland.
I didn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't. I
Straight
had no
away.
idea what it was until
Right.
I started to look.
No one, well, not a lot of people knew, and a lot of people thought it was an illustration, and I think that in some ways, with the first issue, you need to a little bit meet the expectation. You don't want to go too far out there. You kind of want to toe that line between giving something new and then also gaining some credibility in the industry. But I think with this one, I wanted to do something that just started to shift the perspective a bit more, and I really like that people can't quite tell what it is, because then you get into the magazine and you really read through it a bit in a different way.
Yeah, it's
It's
an intriguing front cover.
Yes.
There
It
is,
really is.
other than the title, which even then, I think people would still be intrigued. It's enough for you to pick it up.
Definitely.
So you've succeeded.
Thank you. And I wanted some high contrast between Volume 1 and Volume 2, so that as you begin collecting these issues, they really feel like a full, cohesive collection and not just the same magazine over and over again.
Now, this is a question that I probably should have asked when we were on the podcast. I'm going to ask anyway.
Okay.
Are people always going to be able to get from the beginning? So at one point, there's going to be Volume 10, but will you be able to order the back order of Volume 1, 2, 3, 4 if you've only just started at 10?
That might be a bigger question.
I just thought I'd put it out there.
I think that we'll always aim to have limited quantities at certain moments so that people can have the full collection. I don't think it will always be available, but we'll always have moments.
So like at Christmas or something, there'll be a moment that you can get all of them.
I think we'll aim to have various short runs so that for collectors of the magazine, at different moments in time, you can get back orders and fill in your
I wasn't trying to
collection.
force you into a decision at this moment in time. I just thought it would be. It's an interesting question.
Well, and because we have the collection idea in mind, where we do want everyone to have all of these issues, because we tackle different topics, we would want for them to be available so that they could fully experience the Modern Huntsman philosophy.
But the bottom line is, right now, if it sounds like
Right
something
now,
you're intrigued by, do it. Just
do
go
it
out
now.
and buy it.
So you're not behind.
Yes. So
Right, because it won't always be available.
There's two things I was going to... the first thing I was going to mention, which was related to before when we were talking about the front cover, was the first time with Volume 1 when it arrived, the cleanliness of the front cover compared to a lot of publications here where we're used to seeing a picture which is then mashed with little thumbnails and little captions of what you're gonna see inside, so that you can look on. I know why they do that, because it's so that when it's on the newsstand, you can glance by and say, "Oh yeah, this, and this is in that publication. I like that. I'll pick it up." And I would say, if I was to go and stand in the newsstand now, not just hunting publications, the vast majority, that is how they look, with these little captions, and normally there'll be a competition within it as well to go win this. That is very far removed from how Modern Huntsman looks.
So a huge reason that magazines have those call-outs for newsstands is to get the attention of a consumer when they're actively competing with right next to their competitor magazines.
And that's why you always have the same kind of topics together, right?
Right. And basically what they're trying to do is pique your interest with the headlines, so that you want to pick up the magazine and flip through it. I don't think newsstand has ever really been our goal. And so that became unnecessary, because if we're going to be in, say, some kind of outfitting store, and we have the books next to merchandise and clothing, and it becomes part of the lifestyle, we're not needing to scream to get anyone's attention.
You're not trying to compete.
Right. We're not trying to
doing
compete.
newsstand.
Right. So the goal hasn't really been, and maybe we'll be on newsstand at some point, but for now it's really been more, it would be more of a partnership with other brands. And right now it's just direct to consumer through subscribers. And so we haven't had that necessity, which has given us the freedom to keep the cover clean.
It's
thankfully.
refreshing. Yeah.
And when it's in someone's home and it's next to all the other louder magazines, our hope is that guests will look at this one and pick it up and want to flip through it and become subscribers themselves.
One of the things that my girlfriend Beth pointed out to me even in volume 1, and particularly again now when she was just had a chance to flick through volume 2, is the level of thought that is required in the fonts that you pick and the way that you lay out and size text compared to pictures. And I can't really think, certainly in the hunting space, of any other publication that clearly must spend as much time as that thinking and designing that as part of the layout, because it's not just making sure you've got the right pictures in the right places with text and get that body of text to balance it. You've got loads of different fonts throughout that.
Right. And we did not.
Why have you done that?
Right. So in issue 1, we only had 2 fonts, but we used all of their weights. This one, we branched out a bit more. I have to definitely give credit to Professor Kelly Bryant from college, who taught me all of the rules of publication typography and just instilled in me a devotion to the rules of type. And so going into designing volume 1, I already had an appreciation for natural margin and columns and how many letters can be next to each other, how much space can be in between each letter. When you squint your eyes, it needs to be 60% gray on every page. And I knew all those. There are some.
It's a good thing you went to university, because if you'd asked me to done that, you would have got Times New Roman and across the whole thing.
Right. And so I had all those rules in my head. And what's funny is when you've studied it, but you've never gotten the opportunity to do it.
Do it in practice, yeah.
It was such an amazing experience to actually get to apply something that I had wanted to practice for years. And so that was a lot of fun with volume 1. I mean, other than the stress of production, I can't imagine more of a dream project than working on Modern Huntsman, because of the creative liberty they give me, to really experiment with design. And then in volume 2, we played a bit more with type in the title headlines. And I wanted to have a little bit more opportunity to play and bring out the personality of each article so it didn't feel like a redundant set of columns. Really trying to get away from that column type of publication and more into thoughtful articles. And then I have some ideas for things I really want to play with in volume 3 and volume 4, just continue to raise the bar and introduce new things and see how the community responds to different forms of design. And in volume 1, we used a font called Charter that I love. It's very easy to read. Volume 1 was supposed to be approachable. That was the whole point of that issue, was to really set the tone, introduce the community to what we were trying to do, and that was a very, very approachable font. It's very easy to read, had really great X height, which meant that the articles were, there's a little bit more fluidity to them. Once we did volume 1 and it did well, I have Garamond is another font that I'm in love with and have always liked using because it feels very classic. And so with this issue, I wanted to branch out to a different font that felt just a little bit more classic, to give it more of a journalistic feel. Back to your Times New Roman. It's just a little bit more elegant, but it's in that you're on the right train of thought.
There you go. Don't you could be a designer.
You really were.
Done.
Could be.
Because, and I think I mentioned this to you the other night, Byron, I really enjoy reading, for instance, The New Yorker, because I just love their format for long articles, and it's very easy to read. And I like the way that they combine really long articles with illustration and photography. And so I wanted this to read in a similar way. And so I went back to some of the more traditional typefaces that were used for newspaper and literary journals. and then combine that with the layout for more modern interior and architecture magazines, and you have Modern Huntsman.
It's like an art form in itself.
It's absolutely crazy.
Because the title that you had in our Scottish article, the title felt Scottish.
Ah, that's awesome.
It had almost like a Celtic edge to it, and I don't know why, but that was the first thing I saw when I saw the way the title was. I thought, yeah, that it feels like the picture looks.
I spent some time on those titles, and that's where I really felt like I could have fun with each article to really give the personality behind the contributor in some ways, or to really showcase the content in a different way. I think one of my favorite titles is the Chris Burkard. I wanted that to feel a bit cinematic because his photography is just so epic.
Yeah.
And
so unique.
It is. And so I wanted it to have that romantic cinematic feel. The hunting is not enough article. I wanted to play with scale because of going around on a bus, and just the photography of that opening spread really played with scale, and I wanted to similarly do that with type. And so each title is very subtly trying to re-emphasize some of the underlying themes of that article.
It's it's a beautiful thing from start to finish.
Going back to a more business side of thing, we've had guests on before talking about kind of just following their dreams and kind of just jumping in. Your path has actually been fairly similar because you went to university, you got your degree.
At least you studied something that you wanted to do.
But you studied something you wanted to do. You then got a job that you hated.
Right.
And then you took the leap into effectively being self-employed. So how was that? Like, because it's terrifying. We've done it.
Right.
How do you get your head around, like, I need to do this?
And advice you'd maybe give to other people.
You'd give to other people.
Right.
So many people that would love to do something that they love to do.
Right.
But it's very difficult when you've got a solid 9 to 5 and the security of that to make the break.
Right. I think, funny enough, the thing that's always worked for me is that I enjoy working, and I've always enjoyed working. I've had a job since I was probably 14 or 15, and I loved work. So that helped when I very naively jumped into self-employment, not at all prepared. I barely knew anyone in the city where I was living. I had maybe 1 or 2 very inconsistent clients, no savings, and just believed that I could do it based on nothing. So
believing you can do it is a good way to start.
I know I can do this, and I'm willing to work hard. And that first year was very hard. I now, in hindsight, try to encourage people to have a bit of a plan, a little bit of buffer.
Yeah.
Really helps you sleep at night.
And eat.
Right, exactly. And so I think I really did get to a place where I realized that I had no idea what I was doing, and I jumped in way too soon. And that's when I got the coffee shop job and realized that relationships were so key for me to do what I wanted to do. And it wasn't even just networking, because I didn't realize it was networking at the time. It was just, I was so hungry for a creative community. I mean, I can remember vividly sending an email to another designer saying, "It looks like you found other designer friends in the city where you live. How might I do the same?" And so, it was I was
Craigslist, friends wanted.
Exactly. And
preferably with an interest in design.
Exactly. And so I was just craving that community so badly, but really it ended up being networking, where this person knows somebody who needs a designer, and then you just kind of get plugged in, and then all of a sudden opportunities come left and right. And so I would say, get out of the house and go talk to people.
So where are you from originally?
Birmingham, Alabama.
And then where did you go to university?
Auburn University, which is in Alabama.
In Alabama. And now you're in...
Now I'm in Montana.
But you were in Dallas.
I was in Dallas.
So you went Dallas, Montana.
Yes.
Okay, got you.
Yeah, so...
You like Montana?
I love Montana. It's amazing. I never thought I would say that.
Were you more of a city girl before?
I was always a self-proclaimed city girl. And I think part of that is because that's where the design has always been.
Okay.
So I thought in my head, if I get into a rural environment and I don't have new and fresh design around me, then I might not be as good of a designer, or I might lose the edge. But I think the opposite is true in that there's some oversaturation where you start regurgitating what everyone else is doing. And I felt like design has actually come a bit easier when I've eliminated some of that noise. Plus, everything's available online.
Yeah. If you really... So you feel like you have more freedom of your mind.
Yes.
In a more rural place.
I can just think a little clearer.
And your top designing tools?
Adobe. Pinterest. So, ironically, the very, I don't know if it's dying or just not as well used, world of Tumblr is still one of my favorite outlets.
I used to use Tumblr years ago, and I just kind of, I fell out of love with it.
Well, that's the best part.
I didn't have time for it, but it's still going.
Everyone fell out of love with it, and then I discovered it.
A rediscovery.
Yeah.
Really?
And I do have a...
Do you know, I actually have Tumblr. I downloaded it a few weeks ago. And I don't understand it, so you can show me how it works.
I was using it like Pinterest. Didn't even know that there was the ability for people to follow me. And then I check one day and it's like 44,000 followers.
On Tumblr?
Yes. And it was... I still don't do anything with it other than just the reblog things that I like. But
when you put a picture on Instagram, can you send it to Tumblr?
You can, and I don't know why I don't do that. I probably should.
I just want to see if you can do it.
I can't believe you got 44,000 people follow you on Tumblr.
I know, and it's sometimes I forget about it for 6 months, and then I'll go back and maybe do a couple.
What's on your Tumblr?
It's basically Pinterest. I just think that it's just new photos that I haven't seen.
Is it your work or stuff you've pinned from other people?
It's stuff I've pinned from other people.
So it's like Pinterest, but...
Basically, yeah. So
okay,
it's just a second Pinterest.
I need to check this Tumblr thing out.
This is going to be another social media thing.
Yeah.
Oh,
so that one's a funny one because I put the least amount of effort into it and it has been the most successful, but probably because it's just reblogging. But I found a lot of inspiration there just because it's different from what I've seen on Pinterest.
Okay.
And it's less design focused and more photography focused. And in some ways, getting away from too much design influence can be good for me as far as coming up with fresh ideas. So,
what's going to be the next big social media platform craze?
Oh gosh, I wish I knew. I'd get on it immediately.
You'd be designing it.
I'd be designing it.
There's been lots of little startups that for a while. What was that called? It began with a V or something. Vero.
Yes.
That appeared and then disappeared.
And then disappeared.
I don't even know what that is.
Within 2 weeks, it disappeared.
I wonder.
Well, it's still about, but
right.
uses it.
But no one uses it. I wonder if it'll be something video related, like an evolved YouTube of some kind.
It was was it Periscope?
Yeah, Periscope was big for a bit. That was the basically like live webinar video. But now everyone does Facebook
was that not
Live.
Part of Skype or something.
Somebody
Periscope.
bought it.
Something like that.
I think when you get certain companies like Instagram, who's owned by Facebook,
right.
I think when Periscope came out, within a month, you could then go live on Instagram.
Right. Yeah.
So I think they literally try and crush their opponent as quickly as they can.
So basically, you just spend a ton of money developing something that you think is very cool and innovative and fresh, and then Facebook just copies it overnight
and then crushes
your dreams,
or buys you,
which is really the nice alternative.
It's a good thing for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we were discussing this around the dinner table the other night that I'm very, very close to actually just deleting the Facebook app off my phone, so that it forces me. I have to use it for some work, but it forces me to maybe just spend 30 minutes on it when I get into my office.
Right.
And then that's it.
Be
and then
done.
I close the tab down, and then it won't be on my phone.
Right. I am so done with Facebook.
I like Instagram. Like at the weekends, I'll go on Instagram. I like taking the stories and stuff on Instagram, but I hate Facebook. It really is a terrible, terrible platform. It's full of hate as well.
It's full of hate. It's full. I really think they've rigged the algorithm to like increase your heart rate. So I wonder if they have some kind of deal with, like health clinics down the road.
Wow, conspiracy theory. Not heard that one before.
But yeah, I really am not a fan of Facebook. And actually something I was talking to you about that I really, really wish I could get more of the Modern Huntsman contributors to post their content on Pinterest because
Yeah.
I have loved that platform.
We'll get on it.
You've got to do it.
That's
I
it.
think we might exchange
Yeah.
Facebook for Pinterest.
Do it.
I can't do
because-
another one, so I have to. Something has to give.
Right. I am a bit tired of seeing all of the recipes and blog post title graphics on Pinterest, but I love the platform. And so I would just love for more photographers to get on it so it would just turn it back into a Tumblr-esque
We'll get on
app
it.
again.
We'll change
so
it.
I'm
We'll change
really,
it.
this is a call out
So-
to all
so-
photographers.
So people can follow you on Pinterest. I've only
Yes.
ever used it once, and that was to pin stuff because I wanted to make a man
Right.
cave. But I didn't
Great.
actually look at if you could actually follow people's profiles or anything. So you can actually build a little following for yourself.
You can. Mine's a bit smaller on Pinterest because I had 2 different accounts for a while, but then I realized that was just double the work. So I've now consolidated to just drop cap design on Pinterest, but
But you're also drop cap design on Instagram.
it's true. So consistency has been key. But yeah,
Have you found because over the last 3 years, everyone has a Facebook page when you start your own little business. That is the go-to place. Have you found Instagram and Pinterest more useful than Facebook? Because we know that from our own personal thing, I don't think we've actually had any business through Facebook.
Not sure. That we
All
have,
of
really.
we've made a lot of contacts and we've done a lot of business off the back of the photography being on Instagram,
Right.
and meeting you guys. I mean, that's how you saw
Right.
our work. So
Right.
we wouldn't even be having this conversation if it wasn't for our photography being on Instagram. Is it the same for you?
Yes. So I have yet to ever receive business from Facebook. So I think it's a pretty pay-to-play platform.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I think it was 2 years ago that I started actually putting my own work on Pinterest, and that's when I started getting international clients, which was a really fun new pivot for the studio. Instagram will always, I say always, it has for now been the best place to form relationships. I don't think there's another app that's allowed me to form online business relationships in the way that Instagram has, and they've made it easy. So I am very loyal to Instagram, and I think I will be until it no longer serves that purpose. But
You just pray.
you pray
You
it
pray
stays the
that
same.
because it's owned by the same people. You just pray that they don't meddle with it so much that
Right.
it becomes unusable. Like you just said, a pay-to-play
Right,
thing.
right. And I think we're seeing some signs
I
of
think
that.
I think over the last we've seen particular things where you go, hang on a minute, what's going on here? And potentially it's because you're mentioning certain things
Right.
in the description and so on. But yeah,
It's a little, I will say the algorithm is a little frustrating only in that I don't think it's a true indication of who you've chosen to follow on the platform. And whenever I feel like my community is being meddled with, it's not so much that I mean, of course I want people to see my content, but it's not even so much that. It's that I really want to keep up with the people that I've formed relationships with on the app. And I think they've made it harder to do that.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
that's
sometimes
been
you
my
feel like
beef.
you haven't seen someone for a while.
But I mean,
Right.
there's a few people I've gone, where have they gone?
Right.
And then they're still putting content up. It's just that it's not
You
been
just don't
coming into
see
my
it.
feed. Yeah.
And that can be a bit frustrating because then there's the added step of having to search for their content regularly.
I think our feed looks pretty good because I had a policy for a while. Even
If somebody annoyed him, you just got rid of them.
even if I knew them and they were a good friend
Yeah.
of mine, if they put 3 crap pictures up in a row, they were gone.
That is such
I
a
think
good
that was a
policy.
pretty good policy.
Yeah. 3
Because
strikes, you're out.
For me, Instagram was looking at good pictures, and unless I really, really, really want to keep in contact with a person, 3 bad pictures, you're gone.
Yeah.
That's it.
And you know it's
Brutal.
generous.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Brutal.
it's one bad photo. See ya.
Is there anything, and the answer to this might very well be no, because you need to keep your cards close to your chest, but is there anything that you can share with us in terms of your vision for next issue? Tyler told us what the next issue is going to be about. It's going to be about wildlife management. I guess you're already thinking about this. You
I
probably
am.
started thinking about it before you'd even finished Volume 2 in terms of design.
I have, yes. And while there are definitely some layout things that I would like to play with as far as how we're pairing photography with articles, that I'm excited to experiment with based on some of the things that I've seen lately and how they might apply to Modern Huntsman. Something I have been wanting to do that I think I will really experiment with Volume 3 is starting to bring in more artists. Bring a little bit of illustration and artwork to the magazine.
We can help you out there. I know a few very talented artists from this country.
Yeah.
I do too. Beth being one of them. And so
There you go.
I am really excited to continue to bring some creative uses of content that elevate the content of the articles in a way that further educates our audience, maybe in a way that's unexpected. And I think visually organizing information in a really beautiful artistic way would be a great next step for the magazine. So I'm excited to explore some of those possibilities. A little vague, but
That's fine.
Okay.
I knew it would have to be vague when I asked you that
Yeah.
question, but it's very exciting. We've said it a million times before, but the publication blew us away from day one, and obviously content, it has to have guts and substance with anything like this. But that would be useless if it wasn't carried in a way that was accessible to people.
Mm-hmm.
And you've done an absolutely stunning and beautiful job with the design of it, and it's a massive, massive part of a successful publication.
We need to say thank you for your bringing over some tasty Thanksgiving recipes for us. We appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
That was our first Thanksgiving. So
You
the bread
really-
pudding thing was awesome.
Well, thank you. Y'all really blew it out of the water, though, because I will say Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday. I take it extremely seriously. I have never missed an Alabama Thanksgiving except for this one. And I will say I have never had an appetizer of butternut squash soup, and it is genius. I will be bringing that back to Alabama next year, and it will be very well received.
Well,
So-
we're
so
going to have to
you-
give the credit to our mom for that.
Yes, it was very, very, very good.
So I think we did fairly well. So you had goose, turkey, venison, haggis,
Yep.
and then potatoes, the butternut squash, and nearly everything bar the turkey was either made in the garden or shot out in the
Yes.
fields that you saw there, or the big basin that's across a
Right.
few miles that way.
I was blown away. It was definitely one of the best Thanksgiving meals, and I even brought my Southern staple of green bean casserole.
It was good.
Yeah.
It was very good, and the green beans were sourced from your yard.
Yeah, they were.
There you go.
My dad's
Yeah.
very happy with his vegetables. yeah.
He
very
should
He always
happy.
very proudly
Proud.
tells everybody if we're sitting down for a meal and we've got vegetables on the table and they're his, that they came from his garden.
Yes.
He probably mentions it about 3 or 4 times throughout the meal.
That's amazing. Well, it is worth it.
I might add that also the other thing, the haggis wasn't ours. That
Yeah, we
was
can't
we don't make our own haggis.
Give
You
us
know, I will say though, we have decided that haggis and bread stuffing were meant to go together. So
give
I
us the
think
bread
we can-
stuffing recipe for on the podcast now, because it
I will.
was quite simple.
I will.
So what is it?
Oh great! Now I have to remember.
No, I
if
meant literally like right now.
So it's bread.
It's basically bread, and then you mix in some chicken stock and 2 eggs, and then a bunch of spices and butter, and then bake it. That's about it.
And the eggs are from our garden.
The,
as
the
well.
only thing we
There's
were
some
missing
celery in
is
there
we
as
were
well.
meant to be watching American football. Well,
true.
That was the only
afterwards.
thing that was missing,
the
but
only
the
thing
time
missing.
zone didn't really work.
Yeah,
did it?
we
Is it
thought,
finishing our day.
because Tyler was looking a bit tired this morning because he stayed up and watched American football during the night.
We did.
You didn't know that, did you?
But I will say, on another note, I have never missed the Alabama Iron Bowl between my alma mater, Auburn, and Alabama University.
When is that?
It's tomorrow, but
But you're
I will
watching
be
rugby
going
instead.
to my first rugby game, so
I'm telling you, it'll be better.
I'm excited.
I'm telling you, it's
I'm
a high
excited.
bar. Yeah,
A sold-out arena.
sold out arena with international rugby.
Yeah.
I would say.
I think I've upgraded.
You've upgraded.
I've officially decided to spend every Thanksgiving in Scotland.
You're welcome. and you get to watch the rugby in what is one of the nicest cities in this country.
Oh, I one of the nicest cities in the world. I mean, I am such a big Edinburgh fan at this point. I would love to be there for an extended amount of time. It's great.
Hint, hint. Tyler is also sitting in the room. He's giving thumbs up.
Yeah.
Katie, it's been awesome to speak to you and
Thank
get a
you.
different perspective about Modern Huntsman. The design part of it is absolutely fascinating, and like we already said, so important for the success that it's been so far, and will continue to be, I'm sure. And I'm pretty confident that everyone will have been fascinated by your mindset and what you've been trying to achieve with it.
And
you know,
maybe some young designers out there.
Yeah,
or
hopefully it
designers,
provides inspiration as well.
Inspiration. Show that there is a path you can do.
Yes.
Follow what you enjoy and love. I think that was sort of the main key, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And in some roundabout way, you'll end up in a publication job even when print is dead.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we're going to enjoy the rugby tomorrow.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
And that's it for another 2 weeks. Join us again.
Maybe. We might have a new
We might have another one, but
the full podcast out in 2 weeks.
Will definitely be out.
And we even can tell you who it's going to be.
Who's it going to be?
It's going to be Matt Gibson.
Oh yes, it is.
From he's a Kiwi, but he lives in the States, and he was one of the main cameramen for Jim Shockey for a lot of years, and one of Brandon Shockey's best friends. And we hear about his life, how he got into it, and his experience filming with Jim and what he's doing after. He is the business partner of a previous guest of ours, Cur in Ireland, and I recorded that when I was in New Zealand.
That's cool. And if you would like to contact the show, like I said at the beginning, it's podcast@pageproductionsuk.com. It will be also in the description if you want to find out more about us and get different ways to listen to the show. Then you can go to www.thepacebrothers.com, where all the information that you need is there. I actually did have someone over the Christmas period ask which is the best way to watch. Again, it does happen every few weeks. We get a different person kind of asking, and they were struggling on an Android phone, and I told them to go onto Spotify, and that seemed to solve the problem. I believe Google are bringing out a new podcast app, but I'll bring you that information when it comes. But right now it is Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, Acast, obviously iTunes. Those are the main ones. There is a huge list which I've listed on many other shows before, but if you have any issues at all, we are more than happy to help you out if you drop us a message on social media or any other way, and we'll sort you out.
Don't forget to enter the competition for this week's podcast, which is to win the latest edition of the Hornady Reloading Manual. This week it is a Facebook competition, so jump over to Facebook, our podcast Into the Wilderness page, and you will find the post there with a picture of the reloading manual and the instructions of how to enter, and we will announce the winner in 2 weeks' time.